Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 15.4.1 has been out for a few days. I've been using it full time on my iPhone 13 Pro Max as well as the iPad Pro. So I wanted to share the overall experience and then of course answer that question if battery life is better. Now I did do a YouTube community poll and there's over 12,000 votes at the time of this video. So we have a huge amount of data to see if it's actually better, the same, or worse. So we'll talk about that in a moment, but I first wanted to talk about one feature that I didn't mention in the initial What's New video. My friend Steve Mosier found it, and it has to do with the world clock. You can see here that Apple updated this for Kiev, and you'll see that they changed the abbreviation from KIE to KYI. And you can see that here. So if you do set that for the world time, you'll see it says KYI. This is just based off of their language and has been updated. So that's something they updated in this update that I didn't mention in the initial What's New video. Now, also I wanted to mention something about what Craig Federighi said about auto updating. Apple definitely updates their phones regularly, but if you have your phone set to auto update when it comes to your software updates, you'll probably want to change this if you want to get them right away. This is a question I cover in my What's New videos, but typically if you have auto updates on, they don't roll out right away and they'll roll out over the next couple of weeks. If you have that turned off, you can check for it manually and then you'll get it right away. So just wanted to mention that. And also, if you're not seeing 15.4.1, I did mention this a few different times since more people have been asking me lately, but if you haven't seen it yet, all you need to do is uninstall that beta profile. Because iOS 15.5, which will be next, will be later on, you would not see that as a beta. So you won't see 15.4.1 since it's not a beta. You have to uninstall the beta profile, then check for an update, then you'll see it. Now, in addition to that email, apparently Craig sent out another email, and a lot of Apple executives do respond to their email. And on Twitter, if you follow Apple software updates, you'll see that someone's sending an email. Now, if this is 100% legitimate, it makes sense. We don't have this verified, but I did want to share it, where he said, "Don't worry everyone, Craig is fine, and there are more updates coming to iOS 15, so I guess that includes iOS 15.5. Quite a few people were concerned about that, so someone emailed Craig, and this is his response. He said, "Sure, there are more updates of iOS 15 in the works. No need to get impatient. Glad you're looking forward to WWDC. So we'll definitely have iOS 15.5 updates. We'll talk about that in a little bit after we talk about the overall experience and more. However, I did want to mention that if you're using YouTube and you have YouTube TV, they've finally added picture-in-picture. So if you use YouTube TV, you can go into YouTube, play a video. So if I go to my channel and we'll play the iOS 15.4.1 What's New video, swipe up, and now you're home and you can see it's playing in picture-in-picture. Currently, this is only available in YouTube to premium subscribers, but as far as picture-in-picture on YouTube TV, it's available everywhere now, apparently, according to YouTube. So if you're not seeing that, you should be able to see that now. Now, first, the overall experience for me has been pretty solid. I personally have not had any problems but one, and that has to do with airdropping. When I was setting up this video, I airdropped the wallpaper from one phone to the next. It just wouldn't airdrop. I actually had to try it from my Mac. I tried it from my iPad to the phone and eventually got it to work. It did not work right away, and I'm not sure why that is. I've been having issues with that. So that's the only thing I've personally had an issue with. Thankfully, everything else has been fine. But there are people with some issues with this update, but for the most part, it's been solid for me. Now, I wanted to get right into battery life, as many of you wanted to know what that was like overall, since that's what this update is all about. It should fix battery life if you were having problems. So we'll take a look at the over 12,000 votes on the YouTube community poll in just a moment, but I wanted to share with you my battery life first. And I just switched back to this phone, but I did use it for quite a bit. I was using a different color one for a little while just to try it out. And you can see my battery health is 100%. So this one's holding in well. Updates do not affect battery health. They just simply recheck it. Now, as far as battery overall, I've had 1 hour and 54 minutes of screen on time today and 5 hours and 8 minutes of screen off time, with 22% using my background activity for music. So it does seem like the music bug could still be there, but battery life has actually been quite good. I only used about 30% of my battery life to get me that much. So if you multiply that by 4, giving us to about 100%, we could get about 8 hours of screen on time, but 20 hours of screen off time, which I'm a little surprised that's showing. Either way, I'm going to bed at night with about 60% of my battery life left. So I am seeing a slight improvement there. I had a couple others share their battery life with me so we get an idea of what it's like, since everybody's a little bit different with their usage. And Abhishek sent this in, and I asked him to include the previous version. So on 15.4, he had 5 hours and 27 minutes of usage with 29 minutes of screen off time on an 11 Pro Max. He used about 60% of his battery. When he switched over, you'll see on Thursday, he had 9 hours and 41 minutes of screen on time and 1 hour and 16 minutes of screen off time, and used about 75 or almost 80% of his battery. So he's actually getting quite a bit better battery life, and that's just right away. He didn't have to wait 48 hours. One other person sent theirs in, Coach DeBose. So you'll see here, he went a full 24 hours without charging to see the stats. Decent battery life so far on 15.4.1, seems to be the same as 15.4, which is a bit worse than 15.2 and 15.3. So he gave an honest overview, and you'll see on Thursday he had 7 hours and 15 minutes, and then on the next day, Friday, he had 5 hours and 41 minutes using 50% of his battery. So he'd still get about 12 hours of screen on time. So pretty good overall, and he doesn't have low power mode on or anything else. Now, according to you on the YouTube community poll, after 12,000 votes, 28% of you said it was better. 64% of you said it was the same or you didn't notice any change, meaning it's the same as 15.4. 8% of you said battery is worse. Now, 8% said worse. If we look at 15.4, 19% said worse. So this is an improvement, although we don't have the same amount of votes. We had over 30,000 there. With 12,000 votes, though, that's a pretty good data amount to understand that it's about the same or better and isn't going to be any worse than what you have had before for the majority of people. Of course, there are still issues here and there that some people are experiencing. So we'll read some of those comments at the end of this video, but there are a few problems that people are experiencing. But battery life on my iPad, I missed that in a previous video. So on my iPad, it just hasn't been great. It hasn't been great for a long time. And so if we go to battery life, I actually had to charge it before this video because it was down to 10%. I let it run out all day long, and you'll see it was last charged 28 minutes ago. But before then, it was last charged Thursday. And I only used it a total of about, well, you'll see an hour and 37 plus an hour and 15 and then another 50 minutes. So 5 hours of screen on time or so or less is not great. So that's something we were getting, and I was at 100%, then I went down to 10%. So it definitely could have been better. I thought it was better initially. I'll give it a few more days, but on my iPad, I personally did not notice a difference. Others have, though. As far as other issues people are experiencing, it seems some people are having phantom touches, meaning they would make a phone call, place that phone call. When they finish, they hang up, then it would redial by itself, even if they weren't really touching the screen or anything. I saw this in a couple places where people had some phantom touch issues. Now, if you're not using a screen protector, that can help with that. But if you are using a screen protector, sometimes it can be static with that, but it's hard to say. So maybe try in a different screen protector if you continue to have it, or if you've noticed it since placing that on there. But otherwise, it really shouldn't be an issue as far as phantom touches, and that's something that may be a bug for some people. Also, I'm seeing more issues with CarPlay this time around. I had one other user actually say on a Honda, they had an issue where they didn't with 15.4, and now an issue's returned where it's a problem again. So CarPlay seems to be a hard problem for Apple to actually solve. Also, people have reported some odd brightness bugs. Now, there is a bug for me because I turn off the brightness, the auto brightness when I'm recording video so it doesn't change during the video. Sometimes it stays all the way down, but that's only when I turn auto brightness off and then back on, and then it's fine after that. So it does seem to be a small bug, but other people are mentioning that it just goes over bright or it darkens down where maybe it's difficult to see. There's also a couple mentions of lockups, but for some reason, after a reboot, it fixes it. So there's a few of those. Why that happens, I'm not sure. So it seems to be a bug, but at least a reboot completely fixes that issue. As far as overall performance, it's basically the same as iOS 15.4. When you get a 0.1 update, you're going to get basically the same sort of performance and their minor bug fixes. So whether or not you have an iPhone SE, an iPhone 6S, 6S Plus, iPhone 10, or 13 Pro Max, expect the exact same performance. However, I did run benchmarks like I said I would in the initial iOS 15.4.1 What's New video. So let's go ahead and open Geekbench here. So as you can see, I scored 1,742 for single core, 4,742 for multi-core. If we take a look at these devices, let me put them side by side for you. So we'll go over to Geekbench on all of them. From left to right, the iPad Pro 12.9 from 2021, then the iPhone 10, iPhone 11, and iPhone 13 Pro Max. And in general, the scores are quite good. And if you're within 100 or 200, you can expect the same performance as well. It's great for most people. I really haven't heard any complaints as far as that goes. Now, one thing we haven't seen yet that we expected was WWDC Invites. Previous years, it's already been out by the end of March. So far, we haven't seen that. That's the Worldwide Developer Conference that usually takes place in June, where Apple shows off the next version of iOS, macOS, watchOS, and so on. So we should see iOS 16 there at the Worldwide Developer Conference. Typically, Apple will send out those invites, but we haven't seen them yet, and I suspect this has to do with Apple not having employees there in the office yet. They're set to return to the office April 11th for a hybrid workplace approach, and maybe they're waiting until then to get those invites out to see how it goes. So maybe we'll see them later this month. Maybe they're changing things up this year. We don't really know. But we can expect some sort of WWDC event in June. That's what Apple's done every single year. Whether or not it's in person, though, is hard to say. As far as iOS 15.5 betas, I would have expected them already. So seeing how it looks like Craig, assuming that he actually replied to that email, I would think we'll have them this coming week. Now, again, Apple could postpone that, push that out even further, but this has been the longest we haven't had a beta in a very long time. So I would expect one. I can't guarantee one. I don't know 100%, but I would expect it this week around Tuesday or Wednesday based off what they've done in the past. So hopefully we see that with betas with maybe some new features and additional fixes as well. Otherwise, that's what we're looking forward to. I'm most looking forward to iOS 16 in June to see what Apple has to offer there. Now, if you're wondering if you should update to iOS 15.4.1 and you haven't already, well, typically I'm going to tell you to update due to security reasons. And of course, this is supposed to fix battery issues. So as long as you're on iOS 15, I would highly recommend it. However, maybe if you're on an older version and you really like iOS 14 or 13, you may want to stay there, but you are missing out on those security updates. So I would just caution you there. But typically I would recommend getting to the latest public release and then maybe after that, holding off until the next version comes out, such as iOS 15.5 and so on. Now let's go ahead and read some of your comments. I have my iPad right here, so we'll go over what you had to say, about 10 or so of them. Shiro Yuki says, I'm using an iPhone 13 Pro on iOS 15.4.1, been running for a few days. Letting it settle down, the battery did not seem to improve much. Furthermore, I have a Bluetooth earpiece, Master and Dynamic MW08, that seems to always disconnect now and then. Now, this is something they were supposed to fix with the hearing aids and things like that. Apple approved devices that use hearing assistance. So it's odd that other things would disconnect, but some people could have issues based on the device. It did not happen on my iPhone XS running iOS 15.2.1. Other than that, Face ID with a mask works flawlessly. Hope the battery gets better over time. Cameron Apple fan said, battery seems to be better for me on iOS 15.4.1 on 13 Pro Max. I'm a pretty heavy user and noticed that it drains less fast and is more stable. Also, performance is faster, and 120 Hz ProMotion is super smooth. So far, this is the best iOS 15 update since launch in terms of smoothness with 120 Hz and performance. Apple did a great job with 15.4.1 in my opinion. And I'm seeing that from a lot of people, especially with ProMotion. It makes it easier than ever with 15.4 and so on for developers to enable it. So hopefully you'll see it in many more apps. And also, I forgot to mention earlier on, it does seem that this version actually has faster refresh rates in most apps. So that's something someone sent to me and I meant to mention it. I'll probably mention it in future videos as well and show you what I mean by that. Sappho said battery performance has improved, but I was wondering if anyone has been having issues with Wi-Fi. For some reason, connecting to Wi-Fi is fine. However, the issues come from staying on Wi-Fi. When my screen is locked any longer than 5 to 10 minutes, it completely loses connectivity to Wi-Fi, yet it shows it's still connected on the display. I have to cycle my Wi-Fi off to back on to reconnect. It's just odd. iPhone 13 Pro. Raghav Vijay says, battery is insane compared to iOS 15.4. So much better. iOS 15.4, my battery was 1 to 3 hours. Now I get 6 to 8 hours. iPhone XS. So this you'll see over and over. You're going to see a lot of people with good battery life, but there's a few that don't have good battery life just yet. Ryan Russell said, the brightness is not working again. It goes down to where I can't see it, and I have everything on. I've checked it, and I have reported it to Apple. So like I said, I have an odd issue from time to time with that. I'm curious if you're using auto brightness or not, or maybe you're turning it on and seeing the same thing I mentioned earlier. Khalil says, it's early on, but so far my battery is worse than ever. I told myself I was just going to stick with the software my 13 mini was running out of the box, but decided maybe updates could actually enhance things. Nope, I've had it for 2 to 3 months. Battery health is still 100%, but where I used to end the day with, say, 50%, my battery was in the red when I went to sleep last night. Now, if you just installed the update, I would give it a few more days and see if it gets a little bit better. However, I would check your battery and see if there's a specific app. For example, Facebook tends to actually drain the battery a lot for some reason, especially with more recent versions, depending on what you have enabled. So there's a few things like that I see from time to time, and I recommend people uninstall if they're having those issues. So typically, I would give it a couple days. If it still hasn't improved, I'd be very surprised, as most people say this is better than the initial version. But either way, it doesn't mean some people can't have issues. Ryan West says battery isn't as bad as 15.4, but 15.3 had the best battery performance. Current update drains it more than 15.3. Wish I hadn't upgraded. Art Hendrickson says using 15.4.1 and now challenges with CarPlay, iPhone 12 Pro Max, and Red Honda Pilot Elite, which worked fine before 15.4.1. It doesn't connect readily. And like I said, it seems like Apple's having a very hard time solving these issues, or maybe it's because they're updating things and then maybe the Honda's not updated and those sort of things are incompatible from time to time, and then Apple has to sort of have all of that legacy compatibility. They definitely should keep it updated that way, and hopefully they can solve it very soon. John Schmid says, my biggest issue is still with the touchscreen. Myself and many others have complained about the fact that when you hang up a call, it starts dialing another call to somebody else randomly. And that's what I mentioned earlier, where people were having this issue. And another issue I mentioned earlier from Jeremy DeBose said, battery life, he sent me the stats on Twitter, it's about the same so far, slightly worse than 15.2 and 3. In a couple more days, it might improve a little more, hopefully though. And so that's everything with iOS 15.4.1, a minor update that should fix battery for most, but like I said earlier, make sure you give it a couple days if you haven't already. Maybe you just installed it today or yesterday. Give it a couple days to see it improve, and sometimes it even takes about a week for some people. So it just depends typically on what apps you have, how you use your phone, when you're charging it. If you're leaving it plugged in at night, it's going to update things a little bit more when you're on charge and then on Wi-Fi and you're not doing things. So it just depends on how you use it and how it's updating in the background. And so 15.4.1 seems to be pretty decent for most people, but again, I'm looking really forward to iOS 16 and hoping there's some major changes with that. Let me know what you'd like to see in the comments below. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Oh, and one other thing. Do you like the videos inside, outside? Do you like HDR better, or does it matter to you at all? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below.